unless we're done with it. So we can not necessarily leave it in the past and let it go, but we can leave it in the past and remember what it taught us. So we'll leave it at that. But lesson 8, talking about this idea of admonishing one another. Just a quick little discussion before we get into it. Does anybody have an idea on what the word admonish means? Or do you have any thoughts on when we talk about admonishing one another? We're going to talk about it, so we give us these answers as we go through. But I didn't know if anybody had any thoughts going forward to kind of start us off on what is your view on or definition of the word admonish? To be honest with everybody, my mind is probably about where everybody else is at when thinking of the word admonish, because I feel like it's a word that's not used very often. I had to kind of look it up while I was going through it just to refresh myself on what it means. Joy, where's that your hand up on it?
Well, only if you were going to say that.
No.
Okay.
That's all you.
This is Merriam-Webster. To indicate duties or obligations, to express warning or disapproval, to especially a gentle, earnest, or solicitous manner, give friendly, earnest advice or encouragement, to say something as advice or a warning.
Okay, so a summary on those bunch of words.
Friendly advice.
Okay.
Say, in other contexts, it can be translated instruct or warn, which I think summarizes what she said.
I think so too. And that's pretty much from the thoughts that I gathered and what I was looking through while preparing for this lesson. It's really what we're going to be talking about is dealing with the issues that one another have and how we address people or warn each other against such struggles. Okay? Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense, Audra?
Doesn't to me. I don't know about anybody else.
Okay. Just the word admonish.
Say it again.
So we're going to be talking about admonishing.
I know what it means, but I don't know if I could come out with a definition.
Okay, yeah. That's very, like I said, that's kind of where I was. I don't know if I could have, without looking it up, pieced together a definition of really the idea of admonishing. Like I said, I think the real goal of it is how do we give, see, it's hard. How do we warn each other? I guess warning. I hate using the word warn, but I think it's appropriate. Joy?
I wonder if the motive behind it helps define it better, because it is a warning, but it's not threatening warning.
Yeah,
it's
right.
a I care about you warning. I
Yeah.
care about your soul warning.
I think one of your definitions mentioned the word friendly. A friendly warning against, what. I think the motive behind it, like Joy was talking about, is out of love, out of caring, being like, I'm warning you about this because I care for you and I'm worried about you, kind of way. So I think, as we dive into it a little bit more, we'll see the main purpose and what that's saying. So I just wanted to kind of clarify and set a definition before we got into this. And because like I said, I pondered it for a little while thinking, man, as the amount of times I've probably heard the word admonish within scriptures and within sitting in Bible classes and listening to sermons, and then realizing after all those times sitting there thinking about it, what does it actually mean? So I thought it would be good for us to kind of clarify that and see what everybody else thought about it. So, but starting here in lesson 8, admonishing one another, do I have a volunteer to read that introductory paragraph? Nice and loud.
We are living in an increasingly impersonal culture where people are more comfortable talking to their smartphones than each other. This culture makes warning a brother of potential danger difficult. Add to the mix don't judge me posture of the politically correct, and then admonishing one another becomes even more challenging. While we do not seek to micromanage everyone else's life, we are commanded to reach through our discomfort to warn a brother before he makes a mistake that could cost him his
Thanks, Jeff. For me, it was a little difficult to read that paragraph because of how true it is. Especially in today's age, anything. Before I say this, I'll preface, yes, there are offensive things to say. But it seems like today, anything you can say can be traced back to some offense that doesn't necessarily need to be an offense. So I think as a summary of what this paragraph is saying, it's like, in today's age, we have to, seems to be a danger in how we help each other realize there are different struggles, because if you approach somebody and say, hey, what you're doing here is not necessarily correct, I feel like now more than ever, once again, I've only been alive for like 21 years, so not that long, but I see a lot of the times people getting really offended, really upset, and starting, it comes to the fact that they start to attack one another based on these suggestions. So, does everybody see what I'm saying there? I know my thoughts are kind of juggled up in the air, but it's a really true statement to think. It talked about the idea of smartphones, right? People are so glued to their phones more than each other, right? And trying to help people and trying to help people realize that you're trying to help them. Does anybody have thoughts on that, or kind of let your brain say it rather than my brain? Because it's a real problem. It is, and that's kind of why we're talking about it. I think a discussion can be brought up is, what is the right way to go about helping people with issues and trying to, go against the fact of political correctness or anything like that. If that makes sense. Ethan?
I don't really know if it has anything to do with political correctness. I think maybe that is more the author's own axe to grind. Because I don't think anybody likes being told that they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
I don't like being told I'm doing something wrong, and I don't like telling other people that they're doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's really just human nature.
Yeah, I like that thought, and now that you've mentioned it, I think I may lean more towards that view as well. Because you're right. I mean, even like when I started doing garage door work, I knew absolutely nothing. So when people told me I was doing things wrong, it frustrated me. But at the end of the day, it was clear as day that I'm definitely not doing that right. And if I continued to do it, it would not work out well. But I still did not enjoy when people were like, "Man, you're doing that wrong, and you need to fix what you're doing." So I think Ethan's right on that. None of us like being told what we're doing is wrong, and it's not, and it can be uncomfortable, right? Ethan mentioned the fact that I don't like to tell people that they're doing something wrong, and I think that's the fact that it can be an uncomfortable situation, to where we go up and we're like, "Hey, I just want to let you know, kind of your thoughts on what they're doing," and it can be uncomfortable, especially when they don't agree with you and they fight back and all that kind of things. Jim, did you have a comment?
Another way to help emphasize that is, people don't like to be admonished, but there's no way you can skin a cat and make him like it,
Yeah, that's true. Kind of like what I was talking about with the whole garage door thing. Like, you can't have it the wrong way, right? It has to be the right way. So that's true as well. Joy?
Just as a worst case scenario, if it's someone that you never speak to, and that's
Okay.
the first thing you ever say to them is an admonishment, that's probably not gonna go over well.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And we've had discussions within this class talking about how we address people when we first meet them, right? And I think admonishment is probably not the great introductory conversation to have with people, because I think, Joy, the point you're trying to get at is we don't want to make a first impression of I'm judging you, or we need to fix you right off the bat. I think that's a conversation we've had here before, like, oh, we see somebody, let's go fix them, right? Let's have, having that mindset. So I think you're pretty spot on with that one as well, Joy. Oh man, I had a question and it left me. So, how do you get to the point, going off of what Joy said, how do you get to the point where you have, or maybe in the right situation to admonish somebody? When when is that point clear to when, okay, we have this relationship. I now rather feel comfortable, or now I think is a good time to give some admonishment within a scenario.
You know, right in First Thessalonians, the 5th chapter,
Yeah.
that verses from verse 12 to verse 15, and admonishes right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Let's read it.
Go for it.
We request of you, brother, that you appreciate those who diligently labor among you and have charge over you in the Lord and give you instruction, and that you esteem them very highly in love because of their work. Live in peace with one another. We urge you, brother, admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with everyone. Verse 15, see that no one repays another with evil for evil, but always seek after that which is good for one another and for all people. Right in the middle of that is this word of admonish, and it covers the whole gamut of things here, but it's included within those 5 verses.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, Gail. We're going to talk about that passage a little bit later, but going off of that, so what is that passage recommending about admonishing? What is it saying to do that for?
It's concerned with love for that individual.
Yeah,
And you know, sometimes you just get carried away.
you do.
And that's not right. When you have a problem that needs to be worked out, really, you need to take someone else with you so that 2 of you can
Yeah.
help that individual.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Emotions can get really high in
Yeah.
situations like that, and especially when you deeply care about the situation and about the person. So I think that's a really good point to bring up within that passage. Margaret?
Did you notice that it starts with honest positives?
Yeah,
And so, I know if you are the boss somewhere, you have to correct somebody. If you can start out with honest positives,
yeah,
but they have to be honest.
yeah,
They can't be just something you want to say to make them feel better. But if you can start out that way, many times what you have to say in the way of admonishment is better received.
yeah. I think so too. And like you said, they have to be honest, because if they're not honest, it makes that admonishing mean nothing. And it makes the positive side you're trying to bring out mean nothing. And it's,
And also, sometimes you can say, instead of saying you're doing this wrong, you can say, do this right.
yeah,
You know, that's a thing with children.
yeah,
Instead of saying quit doing that, you can say do this.
yeah. It's funny you mentioned children, because I think even at older ages, we all tend to like more positive discussion and positive conversation than more negative. So, but I think that's a fair point to bring up. The way we go about the angle we approach it at. So I think that's a good thing to bring up too. Okay, so we're going to start in Romans chapter 15. And this is talking about Paul and the brethren there in Rome. So this first question is dealing with solely verse 14. And so I have a volunteer to read verse 14 of Romans chapter 15. Go ahead, Ashley.
But I myself am fully convinced about you, my brothers and sisters, that you yourselves are full of goodness, filled with all knowledge, and able to instruct one another.
So what was Paul confident in that the brethren in Rome were able to do? There, that last phrase of the verse.
Admonish one another.
Yeah. In my version, it says instruct one another. And I read a couple versions of this, and I wanted to kind of discuss a little bit. Is there a difference, and do you think this is where kind of a translation issue can be put in place with admonishing and with instructing? Because in my mind, admonishing is addressing a situation to try to steer clear of what somebody is already doing wrong. And then on the other hand, instructing is just teaching outright. Nobody's necessarily doing anything wrong. but you're instructing at that point? Or do we have to look at the context of what Paul is getting at here? Brace?
I think it helps us to see the perhaps the subtle ways that this particular word could be used. I think, like you said earlier in class, we have a tendency to get a sour taste in our mouth when we start talking about warning.
Yeah.
Warning sounds harsh and abrasive and aggressive. And the biblical use of that word, which does mean warn, is not that, that's not the nature of it.
Yeah.
Instructing, I mean, Daniel and I work in the same job. Daniel could instruct me on how to better perform certain functions in maintenance and HVAC unit.
Yeah.
Because he's got more experience.
Right.
And he's learned better ways to do some things. It might not make my way wrong in this particular instance, but he might have a better way of doing it, and he can help me with that. Or it might be wrong.
Yeah.
And I may get the job done, but it's going to ultimately lead to a failure somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so Daniel helps to point that out. And so this idea of instructing can be not informing them for the first time. Maybe they know about it.
Yeah.
Maybe they've chosen a different method of applying, and we're just trying to help them see that there might be another way to do it that could be better.
Yeah.
So admonish, warn, instruct, are all subtle,
yeah.
subtle translations describing ultimately the same activity.
Yeah. And the way you explain it, I think that, we can ask ourselves the question, can we be instructed on things we think we already know?
Sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of times, right, we go about things thinking we know the right way to do it, or thinking we have all the right answers. And maybe we've even been educated in a sense on things before. But as time goes on, you realize something's not working. You can be, in my mind, you can be instructed once again on being corrected on a better way or a right way to do things. And I think that's kind of where you're going at. Whether it be warn, admonish, instruct, we can take this term to instruct one another to a point to where it is admonishing in a sense. It is saying, hey, this is what we're supposed to be doing. Jim?
Yeah, in Colossians 3:16, in the same passage, it says teaching, admonishing one another. So every time we come together, we do some admonishing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I didn't realize that about that passage. Yeah, every time we come together, we can have, we usually do have times of admonishing where we are instructing, or we're coming together and kind of talking about different things, and I think that's right. And I think Bryce is right on the term, using the term instruct can have a better sound, a better ring to it, rather than like, well, you guys are good at warning each other, because everybody's doing all these terrible things or whatnot. So I think that's another way to look at it as well. I think that is kind of the goal I had for that question is, what really does that mean? Is this all making sense? Okay. I just want to make sure. I don't want to be up here. I'm not doing my job right. I move on without people understanding what's going on. So, and the fact of the matter is, sometimes I don't know what's going on, but that's okay. I think teachers can learn just as much as students can in this month. So, just because I'm facilitating, that's the way I look at it, doesn't mean I can't learn a thing or two while I'm up here. And that's why I kind of like doing this a lot as well, because I get to learn things as well. So that's really cool. Anyways, there's my tangent. So let's get into kind of the nitty gritty. We talked about it a little bit. What are some examples, or in just general sense, what makes it so hard to admonish a brother? We talked about situations being awkward. We talked about, the kind of relationship you need to have. What other things, or if we want to expand on those two things, makes it hard to admonish one another? Bryce?
If we got the right attitude, nobody wants to point out where someone needs to make correction. It's not comfortable. It's not a comfortable place to be
Right.
for multiple reasons. But if we love them and we want to help, a necessary part of our relationship and of our service to God.
Yeah.
And so it's a conflict, which is what this becomes in some ways,
Yeah.
is an uncomfortable place to be for most of us, hopefully. And that's a good thing. It says that perhaps you're the right person for the task.
Yeah.
But it also gives us a warning ourselves of the need to cautiously approach the situation in a way that's thoughtful and prayerful and makes it evident what our reason is for approaching them in the first place.
Yeah. I think in a sense, hard is a good word to use, but at the end of the day, does it really have to be that hard? If we pray about it, like once again, we won't take away from the fact that it's not going to be easy, but after praying about it, after asking God about it, after building that relationship with a certain person and being comfortable with them, knowing for example, like me and my wife, we have a very, I would hope, solid relationship to where we can pretty much talk about anything with each other. Now, are some of those conversations easier than others? Yes, but we've built this connection and relationship to where it's easier to talk about hard things. And you can tell the difference from someone who you don't talk to that often, or an acquaintance or a friend or whatever. It's a lot easier to talk to rather your spouse, a family member, than it is them, right, Bryce?
That's true, and the better our relationship is, the better the avenue is for us to be able to approach a topic like this. I mean, Ashley and I have been married now for a little over a decade, and the reality is she can tell you that my reception of something that she brings to me that might be an encouragement or correction or an admonition, part of my reception of it depends on my day. Depends on the mindset that I'm in, and that can make things hard too.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't know where somebody else is when we approach them.
That's true.
It's still needed to approach them. We still need to do it.
Yeah.
But where somebody else is can have, where both of us are. Where I am might have to do with might end up making a determination as to how I receive it.
Yeah, that's
where
true.
you are may make a determination in how you approach it and how you present it. And so all of those factors go into it. Those are all things that perhaps go through our mind and make us more reluctant to do what's needs to be done.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, sometimes we have to do what we're called on to do.
Yeah.
And realize that there's so many factors that are involved that we can't control.
Yeah.
And so, again, approaching it from a prayerful, thoughtful perspective with concern for the person and approaching it in that kind of compassionate attitude may go a long way in how they receive it.
That's true.
Will certainly go a long way in how we approach it.
Yeah.
And present it.
You may not be able to help fully the mood they're in, but the way you present it can affect it a lot better. I struggle with that one a lot because if anybody who's close to me knows my mood can change pretty easily, and I've overreacted to stupid things just because I was in a bad mood. I think we all have, right? There's been times where we were just grumpy because work didn't go well, or you stubbed your toe right before you came downstairs or whatnot, and it just made you hate everything. So, but that's not fair to the other person. It's not. And sometimes I think that's what we have to realize is if we're being told about something we're doing wrong and we are in a bad mood, maybe taking a breath wouldn't be such a bad idea. And kind of before we blow everything out of proportion. And this is kind of a reminder to myself, like I said, when I'm in a bad mood, I definitely have a tendency to overreact about things that are not that big of a deal. Jeff?
I was just thinking, as we think about admonishing one another, I think one of the first things we need to do is see, is this an admonishable action on the part? Rather than, because there may be something that's my opinion,
right,
that I think, well, he needs to be admonished on that. Well, is this in my opinion or is it doctrinal?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the first things we have to do is look at, is this really an admonishable action?
Yeah. I think that's true because once again, we all have a lot of very strong opinions. And it can be hard to determine what's opinion or not. But at the end of the day, you can probably figure out quicker than you can understand that you can what is an opinion or based off what is facts. Because that's true, right? We all do have some pretty strong opinions, and I think that's where that comes from. So, anything else on different ways it's hard to admonish one another? Joy?
A couple of things that I have only recently learned is to say, to like affirm what they're doing, however, follow up and say, I used to think of it that way too, but this is really what I learned from that. So be relatable and not superior.
Yeah, there you go. You're not better than them. Just because you're approaching them on something you may understand a little bit better than them, doesn't mean you're overall a better person than they are. And I think that's a mindset we all have to be careful of, because I can admit to this as well, it is really easy to put people below you in your mind. It is really easy to look at somebody and be like, oh, I'm way better than them. Oh, I have it so much better than them. Oh, I'm so smarter than them. I know a lot more than them. Joy's exactly right. That's not the way to approach it. And that's dangerous. Because if that's the way you're doing it, then you don't really care about the situation. You don't really have the right heart, the right mindset to approach somebody in that situation. We have to be careful, and we have to truly know why we are approaching them. That's really good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I used to lock myself on my car.
Okay.
With some regularity. And I decided that I'm never going to lock a car door unless I'm holding the keys to the car in my hand when I lock the door.
Okay.
And I still do that. And if you're ever with me, I may have my hand in my pocket or on top of my keys in my pocket, so that I know, even though I know 100% my keys are in my pocket, I'm going to touch those keys in some way before I lock that car door. And it's been over 30 years since I've locked myself out of my car.
Okay.
But sometimes to hold my keys, I set my phone down in the drawer of the car. And once I recovered that phone while driving down Interstate 65, much to the delight of the people following behind me who saw me roll down my window, reach out, grab my phone, and bring it back to the car. Another occasion, that phone blew off at about 50 miles an hour, and that was the end of that phone.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to admonish you on not locking yourself out of your car, I could say, if you always hold your keys, your chances of locking yourself out of your car are pretty slim.
Yeah.
Or even zero.
Yeah.
If you always do that. I always do that. I'll have to go find my jacket sometimes to make sure I have my keys before I lock that car.
Yeah.
Okay? Does that mean that's the only way to stop locking yourself out of your car?
No.
It's not. Is the only way not to break a phone is not to put it on the roof of your car. So these are two absolutes for me that I won't do anymore because I've learned the hard way.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I have to tell everyone that's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
So I think an admonition, when you approach it in terms of God's will and the message of salvation, I think you want to always remember that you can give caution. This is a word I have only heard once so far. I think this is advice of caution.
Okay.
And I think you can say, I noticed that you tend to lock your car a lot.
Yeah.
And regret it later. You might think about this. There might be other ways to address your concern, your problem. And I think it's, in looking at Romans 15, Grace almost did a full outline of verses 14 through 17. You do it with goodness, you do it out of knowledge, and you do it knowing that God has given you grace for everything you've been forgiven of, for the problems that you've created. And I think if you have those elements, and he said it, it then becomes a lot easier. I think the last challenge is, whose job is it to admonish? So I see a pattern of behavior that I know can lead to harm.
Yeah.
Because I've lived it, or I've been close to it in somebody else.
Yeah.
I will offer that makes it my responsibility.
Yeah.
Sometimes we want to look for someone else to go tell someone else what it is that they're doing wrong instead of dealing with ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we are uncomfortable when we do this. But if I can speak with some knowledge, some personal experience, and some mercy, knowing I've been forgiven, then I am the perfect candidate to admonish someone.
I think so. And I think situations are built up that way for a reason. I think the reason why we can admonish one another because like you mentioned, I've been through that, right? And I'm the one who has been on the other side of it, so this is probably a good thing for me to do to help somebody else out. I love that example, and I love the thought that you brought up that there's there's sometimes more than one way to correct a situation or to resolve an issue someone may have, and that's something we don't often think about. I think so, but it's also good to know that if you're ever with you and you don't have your keys on you, your car might be unlocked. So everybody keep that in mind about
Either in
Greg.
the seat or it's still hanging in the ignition, because I leave the ignition a lot.
Oh, do you? Okay. Well, if you ever out a vehicle and need a loaner, you can go to Greg's and I just hop in the car. No, thanks for sharing that. I think that's a really applicable point for us talking about that kind of stuff. Really, and mindsets, right? There's not always. There's sometimes and oftentimes more than one way to fix things, and really, whose responsibility is it? That's a good thing to talk about as well. So thanks for that.
I'll add on the storyteller. Sometimes admonition takes a little longer,
Yeah.
because if you can tell a good story, you can make the point without it stinging as bad.
I think so too.
Hitting someone over the head or something.
Yeah. And I think admitting that you've struggled with it, right, kind of helps it bring it on a more personal level. It's like, hey, I'm not coming out of this like with left field, right? I've been through it. I've seen the struggle and I've been through the struggle, but I've also been on the other side of it and figured out different ways to help better the situation. So I think that's another way to look at it as well. Okay, I have one more point to mention on this one before I move on. I think one thing and one mindset we can get in is, how is this person going to view me if I bring the situation up to them and tell them that they need to do better? And that's not necessarily the right way to put it, but you know what I mean. I think we can all sometimes get in that mindset of, oh, I'm scared because I don't know how they're going to view me after this. Are they still going to like me after this? Are we still going to have a relationship? I think a mindset like that can really scare you out of admonishment and really get in the way of a relationship. But if you do have that structured relationship, that closeness with one another, that should be an easier thought to get past. Because I know if I bring something up to my wife, maybe she'll be disappointed in me, maybe not. But at the end of the day, she's still my wife. And I have full confidence in her that she's going to help me and love me through every situation. So that's a good way to look at it. But I have struggled with that in my life. With people very close to me, is like, how do I correct somebody and them not hate me for it? And sometimes we have to accept the fact that they're going to hate you, that's their problem.
I'm going to argue that if you want a good relationship with someone, you do this.
Okay?
Because that's going to improve the relationship, even if they
I
don't want
think
to
so.
hear it. Once they realize that you did it because you care for them and love them,
Yeah.
that's improving the relationship. That deepens the relationship, and it creates a more significant bond. This is how you love people.
Yeah.
And so how are you going to say this is a threat to my relationship by loving someone else?
Yeah.
So just look at it that way.
I think so. That's a great way to look at it. Because, at the end of the day, what's the reason for this? It's because I love you. It's because I care about you. I want to help you get better in a better spot. It's not because I think I'm better than you. It's not because I think you need to change your life because everything you do is terrible. No, it's because I love you. And, I'm here to help you through things. And Greg is exactly right on that. Bryce?
What you're talking about with Emily is what's called a safe place.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is essential in a good marriage.
Yep.
But it's also important that we recognize that we ought to be able to develop that kind of relationship with each other.
We should.
And it takes some of the same tools
Yeah.
and some of the same work in our relationships as brethren
Yep.
that it takes in a marriage. And so there are a number of people who are here who are part of this church, in addition to Ashley, who I know are a safe place.
Yeah.
I can disagree with.
Yeah.
We can have some serious disagreements, but they're a safe place. Their way of looking at me and my value in their eyes is not going to change.
Yeah.
And we might get mad at each other, and we might avoid each other for a little while until the air kind of clears and the dust settles, but ultimately we're still going to be brethren, not just in name, but in our working together and in our relationship with each other. And so it's important for us to develop those safe places and other places than simply at home.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I think I mentioned it last Sunday. This is a safe space. There's no reason this should not be a safe space. And there's no reason that if we look around this room that I cannot trust you guys with anything. You know, we should have this relationship. And God has built this church on that foundation, I think. God has given us each other for a reason. And that reason is to be here for one another, to help one another, but mostly to love one another, support one another, and trust one another. We are a safe space. That's what makes this place so important to me. And that's what makes it so important for me to be here and for me to be a part of everybody's lives. Do I fail at times? 100%. Am I not always the greatest person to be around? Facts. But this is a safe space. This is why we come together. This is why God has put us all together in this situation. This wasn't for any ordinary reason. We weren't just thrown into a pile of dirt and say, figure it out. This was meant to be. I truly believe that. And I think God has a hand in every congregation that gets together. And He has a purpose for each one of them, right? To build one another up in love and good works, to be there for one another, to love one another. That is why we're here. Does that make sense? Does that mean something to you? That's another question. Have you allowed yourself to let the space be a safe space? Because we can be our biggest limitation to opening up to people in the church. We can be our biggest enemy in that factor. Have you realized that? We have to give into it ourselves. We have to 100% commit to this group. Does that make sense? It's important to do that. It really is. Embrace is 100% right. Just as much as we can do this with our spouses, with our family. Let me tell you something. We are a family as much as any other families are. And that means something. It really does. We are a blessed people. That's all I can say. We are very, very blessed to have one another. And I'm very thankful for that. So, anyways, there's that. It's very important. Remember that. If you don't get anything out of the night, remember that. Okay, write it down. Hammer it in your head. Do whatever you got to do to remember that. Write it on your fridge. I'm not a big fridge person, okay? I don't put stuff on my fridge. I'm not judging you if you put stuff on your fridge. But I've never been a fridge person, so. But if you are, go for it. Put it on your fridge. Alrighty. Is there any other thoughts to add to that? I think we had a very good conversation there. I really appreciate the involvement there. If there's nothing else, let's go ahead and look at this next question here. What reasons should we admonish a brother in spite of difficulties? Is there any specific, this could be hard to talk about specific examples, but is there anything that comes to mind on the reasons why we should admonish people?
Obviously, to help save the soul.
I think that's
there's obvious things. There are a lot of other reasons. You know, to see a person doing something that is the wrong thing to do, if you can help them to stop doing that thing and to do something there, it also helps them here
it
and
does.
now, not just in eternity.
Yeah, you're exactly right on that. I mean, each one of us are a soul, and if you see a soul that is in danger, it's a necessity to take action. I mean, it's another one of our jobs is to help each other get to heaven, and I think that's kind of the ultimate goal we're getting at here. We are resources for each other to help us grow towards that end goal. If there's a cause for a soul being lost on the wrong path, that's a necessity and a priority we need to take action for. I think Margaret's right about that. A soul is worth everything when it comes to the ultimate goal and the two sides you can be on. There's only one side that is acceptable. And there's only one side we all need to be on. And it's important that we all help each other be on that. I think Margaret's right. I put all in any sin because at the end of the day, sin is going to lead us away from heaven. And sin is going to be the one to destroy our soul. So what I'm getting at is I don't think there's really a whole lot we could say that's not sin, right? That's not something that's going to really hurt and damage our soul in the long run. So I think that's a pretty self-explanatory question. But it's important to remember, why are we doing this? And what's the purpose behind it? And what is the reason for helping people out in this way? Because all souls are worth saving. You know, if all souls were saving, I don't think Jesus would die for every single one of them. That's the way I look at it. Jesus and God themselves realized how important every single soul was. So they took it upon themselves to make the ultimate sacrifice. To, at the end of the day, put us up there with them. Remember that too. Anything else on that? Is everybody okay after that? Everybody make it through that okay? Trying to decide if I want to move on or not. We have like 2 minutes. Because this kind of gets into, I think, a new question that has multiple parts. With these last few minutes, could we pray together? Would that be okay? To pray over this topic and pray for one another? Let's pray. Father God, we thank you so much for the group that you've given us here. Lord, it can be very, very difficult to discuss topics that can cause division, that cause strife between people, and unfortunately, I think a lot of situations where some people have been in, their only experience with that is people being harsh, people being unloving. Tonight we want to be especially thankful for the love that you've shown us. We've emphasized the importance of this love, that the love that you had to send your son to die on that cross, to show each and every one of us that we matter to you. Lord, we're thankful for that. We're thankful for that love that you showed us so that we can ultimately show it to one another. We ask that you be with us in these situations. We ask that you guide us and guide our hearts. And we ask that you be with the relationships that we have with one another, that at the end of the day, if one of us is struggling and needs assistance in something we're struggling with, that we all come together in not harshness, not judgment, but love, trust, and peace to help one another out. Because, Lord, once again, if we've missed heaven, we've missed it all. And we're so thankful for the opportunity that you've given us to be a part of that. We're very thankful for who you are and what you've done for us. We ask that you continue to be over this group here at 25th Street, in the direction we're going, and to the people that are here. We ask that you continue to love and show your support to us, as you always have. This is in your son's name we pray. Amen. You got a question? Okay.
You person.
Okay.
Is your wife a fridge person?
She's got a couple things on the side of the fridge. Yeah,